Welcome back. All right, so who wants to talk about payroll? Anyways, all these topics, right? You're not going to get this anywhere else. Yeah. And so high tech too. But I want to talk about payroll today, and I want to talk about payroll around the four major leagues. And I know MLS is a thing. I understand MLS is there, but for today's purposes, I want to look at the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. And when we talk about payroll, I wanted to have Major League Baseball on the board, but Major League Baseball, as I put, is ridiculous. They have a CBA through 2026 that there was some debate about whether or not that CBA was going to get signed. There was some discussion about maybe there being a lockout or a strike, but I think cooler heads prevail right now because with the economy being as it's been for the last 3 years, the last thing you want is millionaires and billionaires arguing over money publicly in front of fans. It's just a bad look. And so Major League Baseball understood this. They haven't had a shutout or a lockout or a strike in a long time. And I think they remember the damage that those instances previous had on the game, especially when they wiped out a whole season of baseball. It really had left a scar on the game for quite some time. And especially for Expos fans like me, the Expos were going to win the World Series that year. I think it was a big old conspiracy to keep Montreal from winning. Anyways, that being said, Larry Walker fan for life. I want to talk about the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. And this is apples to oranges. It really is, but it gets thrown out there because right now we're seeing the NHL with really incremental growth in the salary cap, and the other leagues not so much. But what's interesting is people aren't giving the NHL enough credit in here, and also the economics are completely different. So I'll start with the NFL. The NFL is a cash cow. It is making just money hand over fist. It is so profitable. In 2020, their maximum for salary cap for a team, $198,200,000, an increase of 5.31% from the previous year. Now, pandemic hits, shutdowns, everything else goes on, and we see a drop. Their salary cap dropped. The maximum the following year was $182,500,000, a drop of 7.92%, something the NHL wouldn't do. And I said at the time, scale those salaries down, figure out a way to make this work, and then the salaries will bounce right back up. But instead, the NHL kept the salaries the same, and I've discussed that in previous videos. 2022, we see the NFL's salary cap go up quite a bit. $208,200,000 becomes a maximum, an increase of 14.08%, and $10 million more than 2 years previous. And this year, $224,800,000 being the maximum, an increase of 7.97%. But when you look at the numbers, in 2012, the numbers for the NFL, they made $9.17 billion. And in 2022, the league made $18 billion. So their income has gone up twofold in the NFL. And yeah, this is a league where they're just printing money right now. The NFL is not a league you can compare the NHL to at all. Then you get to the NBA. Now, the NBA is a popular one to compare the NHL to for a serious reason, which is that the NHL at one point in time was bigger than the NBA, both in Canada and in the States. Now, in the States, it's not close to the NBA anymore. And in Canada, the NBA's gained ground on the NHL as well. Now, the maximum in 2020 was $109,140,000. No change. So this is that drag on your revenues. And so you see no change. And then the following year, 2021, a 3% rise to $112,414,000. And then, much like the NFL, we see those incomes jump. $123,655,000 becomes the maximum. That's an increase of 10% from the previous year. And then this year up to $134 million, an increase of 6.37%. So your maximums go up quite a bit across the board here for the NBA. But again, their revenues, they were at $3.7 billion in 2012. And in 2022, they were at $10 billion. So that's a huge difference right there, almost tripling their business over the last 10 years, right? So that is something the NBA has going for it. It's definitely it's growing in its popularity. We see more and more NBA stuff everywhere. And yeah, it is a popular sport. And one thing that the NBA has going for it is you get a basketball and a hoop, you can play. I've always thought that basketball, soccer, To some extent, baseball, not entirely with baseball, but I mean, you can get a bat and a ball and a glove and go out and play. Cost and being able to just go out and play it yourself makes a difference. And I think that's one of the things with the NHL that's a little different. You have to know how to skate. You have to go through all this other training. The costs are really prohibitive. It is a big difference between that and just going out, getting a basketball, going out and finding a hoop. Easy enough to find a hoop anywhere, really, across North America. And so I think the NBA has done a really good job of marketing itself as well. And I think the NHL would have a lot to learn in terms of marketing from other professional sports in North America. Now, for the NHL in 2020, their salary cap stays the same, $81.5 million. And this was not supposed to happen. The plan was 2019-2020, we were going to see the salary cap, once that year was done, go up by $3-4 million. They felt like they were going to make a lot of money. Then they didn't, and they lost a lot of money. The bubble playoffs cost them a ton of money. So it's, where's that money going to come from? Well, we'll just have the players owe us. Again, was that the right decision? You guys can tell me one way or the other, but I really thought years back, yeah, that. I don't know. So the salary cap stays the same the following year, no change. And then last year, the salary cap went up to $82.5 million. Last year, meaning the one that's just finishing up now. So that's an improvement of 1.23%. And this coming season, it looks like it's going to be $83.5 million, which is an increase of 1.21%, because, of course, $1 million is less of an increase from one number to the other. But at any rate, the expectation is next year, the salary cap will go up closer to $90 million. So the expectation is maybe 87.5, 88. I've heard that 90 could be it, which means a raise of more than 5% in the salary cap next year. It will be dwarfed by whatever the NBA or the NFL does. It will be dwarfed by the fact that Major League Baseball is ridiculous when it comes to the amount of money guys get paid to stand around in the outfield and argue with fans. But yeah, the revenues in the NHL is where things are different. So the NHL in 2012, $3.37 billion in revenue. Not too far off from the NBA. But the revenue for this year, and they're still not done counting it, according to Gary Bettman, roughly $6 billion. So the NHL makes roughly a third of what the NFL makes about 60% of what the NBA makes, and probably 2% of what Major League Baseball makes. No idea. But at any rate, I should have had Major League Baseball's on the board, I guess, for their overall revenues. But we know it's going to be much higher than hockey. You have a 162-game schedule. You have pretty big stadiums, and really, baseball can be fun to watch. And with the rule changes this year, maybe we'll see the numbers go up for Major League Baseball, and it'll get more ridiculouser. It's a word. It absolutely is. So I really think it's apples to oranges when you're comparing the NHL and the situation they're in to, say, the NBA or the NFL. So when I hear somebody saying, well, those leagues are being really generous, yeah, they make way more money. Losing $1 billion for these guys, not quite as big of a deal. Plus, gate receipts. Gate receipts make up a huge amount of the NHL's income. They weren't getting those gate receipts for like a year and a half. They were either severely constricted or just didn't have them coming in, whereas the NBA and the NFL have other sources of income outside of gate receipts, and they're not as reliant on it. It's something that's been said about the NHL for a long time. If there's a blessing to come out of the last 3 years, it is that with all of the extra advertising we have, and I know people don't like it on the jerseys, there's some who don't like it on the helmets, although I don't think we really notice those much. And the digital ads, I know people don't like on the boards, but all of those improvements and the gambling tie-ins people don't like either, it means that the NHL now is less reliant on the gate receipts than it was before. I think a lot of the advertising tie-ins that we've seen come in over the last few years, and it's been a bunch, I have a feeling that it would have still happened without the 2020 shutdown and pause, but it's happened much faster. The NHL's realized that these leagues are ahead of them, in part because they don't have to rely on the gate receipts as much. They have other sources of income, which is how you get to $18 billion, $10 billion, and for the NHL, it's at roughly $6 billion. Now, the other debate, of course, is whether or not under different leadership, the NHL could have more than $6 billion, and whether the growth in the NHL has been stymied by certain decisions made when it comes to where teams are, what they do with drafts, and all that other stuff. But for me, for this video, I just wanted to look at just the sheer numbers. And that the idea that, well, the NHL is being cheap because But if you only make 60% of the income of the NBA, you cannot compare them to the NBA, where we've seen increases of 10% and 6%. And in the NHL, it's been 1.23 and 1.21% because of that amount owing. So it really is apples to oranges. And the way that the finances are done between the NHL and other leagues is completely different too. There is no hard cap anywhere except the NHL. And the 50-50 partnership that the NHL owners and players have, while it's been tense and it's been an interesting one, there is some hope that with a new head of the NHLPA, and it definitely sounds like from what Bettman said the other day that they're viewing it as a chance to reset their relationship with the NHLPA. We really could see things get better for the National Hockey League. I think they do need to find other sources of revenue. I think that a best on best World Cup setup absolutely would generate a ton of money, and it's overdue that we have another one. But it's a matter of doing it right, finding the right time. Both the right time is in time of season and when you're going to get the most exposure south of the border. Because the reality is that we could definitely, you could add 3-4 teams in Canada. Sure, let's just go there. You add all those teams in Canada, but you're not going to get anywhere near that NBA revenue. If they're going to get there, it's going to have to be on the American side. They're going to have to generate that money, because I don't know that you could make up that $4 billion difference between the NBA and the NHL any other way. I don't think they have to either, but there's definitely that comparison's there, and so it's something that I'm sure the NHL looks at. It's something I'm sure the NHL wants to get closer to that $10 billion. Because who doesn't want 10? I want $10 billion. I'll take $10 billion. I don't have $10 billion. If I did, I'd just buy the Senators. But at any rate, I do it myself, because why not? Sure. But at any rate, yeah, it is apples to oranges, and that's what I wanted to talk about today, because it's just one of those things that kind of eats at me, because I always see that the NHL's just really cheap. They don't have the money, not comparatively speaking to other leagues. So I don't view other leagues as being more generous, because there are some greedy owners in the NFL, there are some greedy owners in the NBA, and there are definitely some greedy owners in Major League Baseball. But that's for a whole other time and a whole other discussion. I'm maybe the kind of discussion I'd throw on my other channel. But at any rate, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.